I know it's election season and it's this huge win and taxes and spending and there's all kinds of things going on in the government right now. I know all that and they are important things. I am not dismissive of anything that's happening. It's fun, it's good, it's exciting. I'm watching, you're watching, but let's remember that's what this special is about, remembering what is important and what will save us in the long run. You see, if you have a brain tumor, God forbid, but if you have a brain tumor and the brain tumor grows to a big enough size, you are going to begin getting headaches. Obviously, you have a big mass growing in your brain, you're going to begin getting headaches. And headaches suck. I'm not dismissive of headaches. And you can take things to get the pain gone, but that doesn't actually save you in the long run. In the long run, headache or not, you have to remove the tumor. We have elections, and the elections do matter. I'm not dismissive of them in the same way I'm not dismissive of the headache. It's good, fine, that we have a sane administration. We'll get better here and better there, and these things do matter. But in the long run, it's not this politician or this bill or that border wall that can and will save this country. In the long run, what will save this country is the same thing that has saved many a country and ruined many a country. Strong nuclear families or the lack thereof. Nuclear families, a man and a woman getting married, making babies, raising those babies together. It sounds almost like an eye-rolling thing. Oh, you old fogey, open up a history book. Long before there was a United States of America, leaders of nations have noticed and known that they need strong family units because they are the building block of a society. I could go through a bunch of statistics here. 1 in 4 American children are fatherless. Did you know that? That's 18 million kids. Did you know single-parent homes? Well, the kids are 43% less likely to get A's. If you have a single-parent home, your child is 20 times more likely to go to jail. We have a family unit problem. And let's talk about that for a moment. Why? Why is it a problem? Well, you are made by God to have a mother and a father. And I realize that's not everyone's situation. If it's not your situation, I'm not judging, of course, but we are all made to be raised by a mother and a father. That's how we're made. We need both. We need mom. We need dad. We need both. And when you have both, then it puts together the right pieces in you that will send you out into the world and make you better at everything. This is why it's so good for a country. It's not just that you will grow up and be a better husband or wife yourself, a better parent yourself, although you will, and that again, it continues on. You will be a better employee, more stable. You will be a better citizen to your country, more reliable, not in jail, not getting Fs, not... Nuclear families are the building block of any society. It sounds crazy, but one of the most patriotic things you can do for you young people watching, find somebody and marry them and stay married and make some babies with them and raise them with love. It's one of the best ways you can serve your country. That's a fact. And it's not an accident that nuclear families have been wrecked so badly in this country. This is something the communists have done since the Soviet Union. Soviet Union was famous for it. Mao's China was famous for it. The Stasi in East Germany were famous for it, famous for infiltrating and breaking up families. They would do things to turn husbands against wives, mothers against their own children. Children would go turn in their parents to the secret police. It sounds crazy, but it happens. They want to break up the family because they understand stable, normal people will never embrace the sickness of communism. That's why they turn turbo freaks like this loose on your children.
How am I going to explain trans people to my kids? Well, I am a TA in kindergarten class, and I explained it to them today. So, people were wondering if I was a boy or a girl, and so they asked me. One of the kids said, "Barney, are you a boy or a girl?" And I said, "That's a great question. I'm kind of in between." And he was like, "What? No, are you a boy or a girl?" And I was like, "Well, are you a boy or a girl?" And he's like, "I'm a boy." "And what do you think Lisette is?" "I think Lisette's a girl." "Cool." So some people are boys, some people are girls, and some people can be in between, or they can be neither. Most people are boys or girls, And sometimes people switch from one to the other. What? You mean I could be a girl? Yeah, you could be a girl if you wanted to. Right now? Yeah, if you wanted to, you could say, I'm a girl. And if you wanted, I could call you by a different name and call you she. And he was like, but I don't want to be a girl. And I said, that's great. That means you're a boy. And I'll call you by your name and use he. And he said, okay.
You can laugh and roll your eyes, you can scream, but understand that vile little street animal is on a mission to break up families. That's what all that stuff's all about. It's about breaking children away from their parents, shattering the nuclear family, creating an angst-ridden disaster of a human being who will vote communist the rest of its life. It's a fact. Don't fall for it. Don't go for it. And understand this. Democrats understand who their enemy is. They understand full well. Remember when Kamala Harris at her rally, people were yelling, Jesus is King, Jesus is Lord. Remember what she said to them? You're at the wrong rally. The people who hate this country, you know what they fear the most? Strong nuclear families who go to church on Sunday. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I am right. We have such an amazing show for you. Hang on.
And frankly, I voted for Kamala Harris, and I started crying as I was voting. She will bring us forward. She will turn the page against this divisive cruelty and rhetoric and evil.
I'm sorry. I can't stop making fun of these dirty commies. I'm enjoying myself right now. I know James probably is too. Joining me now, my friend James Lindsay, founder of newdiscourses.com. His latest book, The Queering of the American Child, is one every single parent must pick up. Let me tell you that. James, I'm sorry. I know I'm a bad person, but these tears, I can't stop enjoying them.
Yeah, I'm a little torn on that, but when it's these high-profile people, definitely enjoying them. These people on the TV, these people like Randy Weingarten that are running teachers' unions and driving our country into the ground. But I suspect Randy's tears are fake. I think that was pretend. We can say communism's a religion, but I don't even know. I think she actually might be so craven that she doesn't even believe her own religion and just does evil because she likes to.
Yeah, I guess I should clarify. I feel the exact same way. I actually have more mercy than people think for the street animals because they're dumb or mentally challenged and they've been lied to repeatedly. And so they actually are sad and they've gone insane. But evil monsters like that, they're not sad. They know everything they say is lies and they manipulate the dumb people in our society. And I think they're evil. Not bad, deeply evil, James.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like the last at least 8 years for certain, but more than that, longer than that, we have been subjected to an unbelievable, deliberate propaganda campaign designed to drive the American people crazy. We could actually go back a little further to 2012 when President Obama modernized, as they call it, the Smith-Mundt Act. The Smith-Mundt Act goes back to just after World War II, and it prohibited the intelligence communities and the federal government from using our media apparatuses to propagandize American citizens. And they modernized it for social media in 2012 under Obama's direction, and removed that part about not being allowed to propagandize the American people. And so we've been subject to communist government propaganda since at least 2013 in this country, and it has driven people to Trump derangement syndrome, to COVID derangement, to all of these identity politics insanity that we've seen for the last several years that are tearing our country apart. And it's important that we get to a place where we can turn the propaganda machine, the propaganda Death Star, we can turn that thing off and then free the American people. And we'll see a lot of these, dumb, misled, sad street animals come back to the fold. And I think that that's the right view to have.
James, it's not uncommon at all right now to see, especially on social media, you'll have one of these people bragging about how they just uninvited mom to Thanksgiving. They've cut off all ties with their father. I had a heartbreaking actually email to my show about a father whose daughter disowned the family and left the group chat over the whole thing. People don't realize that this is very purposeful, that communists wedge themselves into the family. They don't know about the things that Stasi used to do, that Mao used to do. They don't know that communists break up families on purpose. It's not a whoopsie. They do this on purpose.
That's right. And more broadly, not to take away attention from the dirty commies who deserve the attention here, but this is cult behavior. So even if you're still out there somehow listening to Jesse Kelly and on the fence about whether or not this is communism, you cannot be on the fence about whether or not this is a cult. And communism is the largest, most destructive death cult that humans have ever created, capturing the lives of over 1 billion people, destroying, and I mean literally murdering, somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 200 million people over the last century. Communism is a cult, and so it has to separate people from their families to what they call, to establish what's called milieu control. They have to separate people from their families so they'll forget who they are and will see themselves only through the communist ideology and its application through the state.
That's the same reason they love to tear down statues and rename streets as well on a larger level. The same reason. It's about erasing your history, unmooring you from your past so they can write your future.
You might say it's about being able to see what can be unburdened by what has been. That is actually the beating heart of the communist project. And yeah, renaming streets, tearing down statues, tearing you apart from your family. Not only are these communist bread and butter going back to the Bolsheviks in Russia and to the Chinese, the PRC in China. When we look at the Chinese case, what Mao Zedong did during the Cultural Revolution, you had young people renaming themselves with new revolutionary names. It's exactly like the trans phenomenon, people giving themselves new names with their old dead name. You had statues coming down. You had streets being renamed to revolutionary terms. And the whole idea was to tear down all of the, like you said, all of the mooring, all of the tethering to the old society, so that all that there was for young people was the communist vision for what was coming for their lives in the future. And they would get these kids whipped up on this, thinking that their lives were going to be great once they destroyed all of their class enemies, including their parents, who had to be denounced, including their grandparents, their teachers, their religions. Everything in society that existed had to be torn apart and destroyed. And for about 2 years, there was mayhem in China, 66 to 68, while the young people, the Red Guard, went wild doing this until Mao got his power back and then kicked them all out to the countryside to live in misery and die.
You know, what couldn't happen to better kids? I'll tell you that much. Okay, the trans stuff, it almost seems, that maybe I'm wrong on this, it almost feels like we kind of hit a bottom in our society on this. Please pardon the pun with that. But it feels like we've reached a stopping point there where it went so far. It got so in your face. It got so gross the American people said no. But the American people don't really understand what that was about. What was it about?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm most proud of is in 2019, so way back, 5 years ago last month, I predicted that if they ever went fully public with the trans stuff and the queer theory, that it would be their undoing. And it appears to have been that. I think that that was the primary mover for a lot of people who voted for Trump, and especially a lot of new voters for Trump who are abandoning the Democratic Party and voting Republican for the first time in their lives. And what they don't understand still, and I guess this is a mission for me to try to educate them, is that queer theory is directly a derivative of Marxism. It's not just about finding out who you really are. It's about adopting an intentionally oppositional politics that is oriented against anything being considered normal or legitimate unless the cult itself approves it. And it uses a Marxist line of division that certain people consider themselves to be normal, so they're privileged, and other people are not considered normal, so they're oppressed by the idea of normalcy and legitimacy themselves. And so they take upon this idea that they can transform their sex, transform who they are, rename themselves, and usually to make themselves extremely ugly or scary or something, or to enact sexual fetishes and whatever else, as a way to disrupt normal society intentionally. It's not just about having brainwashed and created social pressures or social contagions for kids. It is a deliberate attempt to destabilize children, to turn them into a revolutionary class that will tear apart society.
All right, so we know why communists destroy children, destroy families. How do we, without getting the government freaking involved, because they'll screw it up, how do we encourage families going forward, James? Mothers, fathers. How do we strengthen families so we never have to get a text message from our daughter that she's uninviting us from Thanksgiving? How do we do this?
You know, honestly, and I know this is a big theme that resonates with you, that we got in this mess because a lot of people were comfortable enough to live their lives on autopilot. People have been parenting on autopilot. They've been just assuming that it's absolutely natural, for example, to send your kids to government-run schools running government programming with not really to even know what's going on with that government programming, and just trust your kids with the government for, 40 hours a week. This has all kind of got to change. It's got to be no more parenting on autopilot. Let's get intentional parenting. And when you get your mindset right about this is actually not this, burden that the left has led us to think that interacting with your family, having children, doing things with them, getting to know them, spending intentional time with them is somehow a burden from the better part of the rest of your life. No, this is a very enriching phenomenon. And you talk to most conservatives, they understand. They spend a lot of time with their family. They enrich that time with their family. So what parents need to be doing is protecting their children from the schools writ large, public especially, private also, but they also need to be spending a lot of intentional time with them, teaching them about the road that they're going to walk, which is filled with this kind of garbage that the kids are going to have to navigate. They should not hear about this stuff for the first time from their friends or on social media, even worse. And parents are going to have to be very intentional. Spend time. Make sure your kids absolutely know that you love them and that they can come to you with anything that they see at their school or whatever that is inappropriate, that says to keep secrets from their parents. And build that relationship. Spend time. Get to know your kids. Have family dinners. All the stuff that makes a family a family. Start doing it again. And that's going to be the number one protection, is to stop parenting on autopilot and get very involved, whether it's your kids' everyday lives, their friends groups, their religion. Take them to church. Do church as a family every Sunday. It doesn't really even matter if you're that religious. Find a good church teaching good values and go together as a family. Churches are places where people are trying to become better people on purpose in and of themselves, and it's a very pro-family environment. So I encourage that. And it doesn't matter also if it's their educational environment. Get very involved all the way to the point, if you can, of homeschooling. Get very involved in your kids' educational process. No more autopilot.
I would encourage the ladies out there, if you so desire, consider substitute teaching in your child's school. My wife does that, and it has gotten her intimately more involved in their education, what they're learning, the administration, the problems that may come. James, you are the man, my brother. Appreciate you, as always. All right, we're not done yet. Cernovich is going to join us next.
I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options.
I like it. I like hearing the GOP start to talk this way, because family is everything. So much more important than party or anything else. You want to save a country? Save the American family. Joining me now, my friend Mike Cernovich, who talks about this stuff a lot. Author, filmmaker. Go subscribe to his Substack, which is outstanding, I should note. Mike, I like that the Republican Party, as many problems as I have with it, is finally starting to get bolder about speaking about family and the importance of it. It's a relief to me.
Yeah, they used to talk. They used to talk about it, and then suddenly it didn't become an issue, right? James Dobson focused on the family, even if he was at the time way too conservative for me. But now I look back and think maybe those fundies had a point, because a lot of the stuff that they would talk about and you would dismiss, especially when you're younger, came to fruition. So yeah, it used to be focused on the family. Everything was about family values, and then it became about tax cuts, a couple percentages here and there, which is great. I'll take a tax cut, but getting people to believe in your political party is very difficult when that is your sole messaging to people is, hey, we'll save you 5% this year, which again, I'll take. I don't want some idiot to chop this up and say, oh, bro, you like high taxes, but it obviously wasn't doing the job.
Mike, why did we become the party of tax cuts? How did that happen? And again, I'm with Mike. Please don't raise my taxes. Like, I'm all about the tax cuts, but why did we ever get away from it? What happened that pushed us away from it?
It was definitely the Chamber of Commerce Republicans. That's what brought in open borders. That's what brought in cheap labor. Mitt Romney, bank capital. Paul Ryan loses Wisconsin when he runs as VP. Trump wins Wisconsin twice, maybe 3 times, depending on who you talk to. They, of course, Republicans lose twice to Obama, which shouldn't have been a difficult victory to obtain. That we allowed the corporate side to control and dictate policy. And if you're the corporate side, or if you're these Republican senators, you don't mind losing because the money's still good. You're playing both sides. You're getting like the VIG, right? Sort of like those when people gamble. The real winners aren't the people who win the bet. The real winner is always the house, right? You're working that. And that was what the Republican Party largely was and was going to continue to be. Because if Trump had won in 2016, I always laugh at these alternative histories where they said, well, now, of course, they look stupid because Trump won the popular vote. But people need to remember that we were being told as early as a year or two ago, gosh, it's too bad that Hillary didn't win in 2016 because then in 2020, they would have had Paul Ryan or some great Republican would have won in 2020, when in fact it would have been the end of the Republican Party as we know it.
Gosh, could you imagine 4 years of Paul Ryan, how freaking worthless we would be? Mike, why are families the building block of a country? I mean, I've put it in my own words already on this show, but what is it about a nuclear family that makes an entire country better? I mean, it's been said, I'm not the first one to say it, of course, but the most patriotic thing you can do is go marry somebody and stay married and make a bunch of babies and be there and raise your family. But why?
Well, it's an investment in the future. The question is why goes into religion or a meaning of life issue that a lot of people don't realize until they're there, right? You think, I remember when I had my first kid, we had a picture. My wife kind of took a picture because I was a little punch drunk. It was an interesting moment, but I'd also thought, what in the world have you gotten yourself into? Everything was pretty easy in your life. So I think that goes to the trend of how the Republican Party lost touch with family. Is a lot of people, myself included, I don't pretend to be above these failings, had an extended adolescence. You see that a lot where there's an emphasis on fun. Oh, that's fun. Everything's fun. Everything's about fun. But eventually the men are going to hit the wall too, where nothing is really fun anymore. And then you're at home alone at night. People like to caricature what JD Vance said about cat ladies. And of course, he didn't say what was reported, but there is a type of a cat man too. And it's a bit more of a bleak outcome for men because women are more social. So the man, I'm going to have fun. I'm going to enjoy my life. I'm going to listen to all these red pill podcasts and talk about how women, shouldn't vote. And, we hate the women and everything. And that's kind of cool when you're in your 30s, maybe. I mean, I don't think it's cool, but you can get away with it, but you're going to hit the wall too, man. You're going to be the cat man too.
Yeah. And men are choosing this a lot now, Mike, and I hate it because you mentioned something that I've really, really noticed a lot. Maybe it's picking up. Maybe I'm just getting older and I notice things more. In a lot of young men who are very understandably despondent, they're angry, their life isn't what they want it to be. They've really checked out on the whole family thing. I hate women. Women suck. And so they don't desire a family. A lot of young people, a shockingly high percentage of young people, don't want to get married. They don't want to have kids. It's just misery to them. And it saddens me more than anything, Mike, how many miserable men we have.
It's a part of the meaning crisis or the spiritual crisis or the virtue crisis, depending on how people want to describe it. But I heard a great, speaking of kids, that was the boy. So speaking of which, he just invaded. There's a great homily I heard from Father Seraphim Rose, and he's an Orthodox monk, and he might be a saint at some point in time. But he gave this great homily on fun and how and it convicted me too. This isn't me convicting others. It convicted me where it said that 100 years ago, you would have sounded like a very silly person, especially as a man, when all you talk about is fun. That's fun. That sounds fun. When did we get this Western spiritual condition where our life didn't become about virtue or duty or obligation, but it's all about how much fun can we have? And that's trickled downstream, which is, hey, I'm a man and I want to have fun. And I'm not here to say don't enjoy life. I would say I enjoy life, probably more than a lot of people. But I heard that and I felt so convicted in my heart. And I even thought I want to eliminate the term fun, at least when I talk about myself, from my vocabulary. I don't want to hear, oh, hey, go talk to Jesse. It'll be fun. Sure it is. This is fun to me. But I try not to think of that way at all. And I realized we were, whether we knew it or not, this childish mindset had trickled down to us, and we had rejected any kind of Roman understanding of virtue, of strength, of purpose, of shouldering a burden. Again, myself included, I don't want to just yell at the young guys, right? That's not it at all. I was certainly there. And once you're living just for fun, you would see children as a interruption of the party. So it's easy for men on these red pill podcasts to say, a woman got an abortion because she wanted to keep partying. It's like, well, who fornicated with her, right? Who got her pregnant? Some guy, who just wants to have fun. And he didn't want to have a kid either. He probably told her to get one. And half the time, he probably even paid for it. So why is it all the time we're just talking about women and how they're not taking accountability for anything, but you don't realize that the man mind has been infected with this childishness and this obsession with everything has to be entertaining and everything has to be fun.
Yeah, it's true. It really is. Mike, you talk a lot about, to raise kids, you have to raise yourself. What are you talking about?
So something that I found influential in our parenting and homeschooling with Charlotte Mason, there's all these principles of the Charlotte Mason pedagogy. And one of them is that you treat children as a whole being, that children aren't little things. At least the way I was treated as a kid, children should be seen, not heard, but children are actually people. They're little people at different stages of development. And then you want to think of, am I treating my child like a person, like a whole person, like a real person? And most of us would realize that if you treated your friends the way you treat your kids sometimes, if you treated yourself the way you treated the kids sometimes, it wouldn't really stand up. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense, and it wouldn't even necessarily be effective. And then as you go deeper into that, you think, well, why am I mad at my kid? Well, I'm mad at my kid because I feel a loss of control. Well, why do I feel a loss of control? And then why is it that feeling a loss of control should upset me? Why should I care? And then why should I have this emotional state internalized and then externalize it to those people around me? Because that doesn't work in your marriage. So why would that work with children? So you realize that your children are shining a mirror onto you, right? There's a quote, no man is a hero to his butler, no man is a hero to his valet. The implication being that somebody who's with you all the time maybe doesn't buy the hype the way people who see you only in your highlight reel moments would do it. And of course, with children, you're kind of their hero at a certain age, although that changes. But what I found with children is that they're a mirror unto you. So one example that's kind of stupid, but I remember my kid would come up and be like, hey, Dad, let's get some chocolate in the fridge. And I paused a minute and I go, well, no, you don't need any more chocolate. And I thought, I don't need any more chocolate. The kid just knows to follow me to the fridge to get a little See's candy or piece of chocolate, right? So there's just 1,000 different ways that they're showing you who you are because you go through life in an automatic pattern and you're realizing, oh, they're showing me that part of myself, or they're showing me that habit. I didn't realize that. I wasn't even conscious of that. I was running on autopilot. And then you realize that most of the time you're upset with your kids, it isn't that they've done some irredeemable sin that really, because as a father, you sometimes have to lay down the law. Everybody knows that. We're not denying that. But sometimes you realize, I'm just in a bad mood. I'm just in a bad mood. And this has nothing to do with my kids. So I need to figure out why I'm in a bad mood and why am I going to let my emotional state dictate how I even feel right now, let alone how I parent. So there's this constant feedback mechanism happening as you raise children in a way that's very intense. And I think that's why people find parenting challenging is the work is the work, but oh, well, you missed some sleep. The work is the work. It's the emotional realization, especially for people who have never examined themselves or tried to improve themselves. You realize that it's a raw nerve if you're not conscious and aware of it.
No doubt about it. And it's hard to be human in front of him. I snapped at mine the other day just because I was in a bad mood. Had to go home and apologize to him that night and own the whole thing. Friggin' sucked. Mike, you are the man. Of course. Thank you, my brother. All right. Abby Roth is going to join us, talk a bit about motherhood next.
We will promote positive education about the nuclear family, the roles of mothers and fathers, and celebrating rather than erasing the things that make men and women different and unique.
I am liking a lot of what I'm seeing. But remember, like we talked about in the open, families, the nuclear family, men and women getting married and making babies, that is the building block of every single society. But how do we move forward? How do we get back to that? Joining me now, Abby Roth, creator of The First Generation. She's also a stay-at-home mom. Obviously, Abby's joined us many times before. Okay, Abby, obviously we don't want the government in the business of family because the government just screws up everything the government's involved in. However, it would be naive to think governments can't at least encourage people one way or the other. What do we want? What do we not want out of the government when it comes to families?
I mean, it's always so important to encourage strong families. I mean, that's the basis of civilization. It's the basis of good societies. Having a mom and a dad at home, it lowers crime rates. It means there's less anxiety in young children if you have stay-at-home moms with their children for the first 3 years. Encouraging strong families is what's going to lead to a stronger America. And so having a president being a big proponent of that and being a proponent of the differences between men and women is incredible. Should government be incredibly involved in families? No. Should government also be big proponents of families? Yes. And we should have traditional families being at the forefront of all of this, right? Because traditional families are what create strong children and create great members of society.
Abby, you mentioned the anxiety thing. I want you to talk about that a little bit more. I'm sure you didn't know we were going to go there. I didn't know we were going to go there either, but it's true. My wife's been hot on this for a while. Well, seriously, that people think, with kids, especially when they're super young, from 0 to 3, that maybe what's happening is not having a big impact because their brains are goo and they're still spreading food all over their eyes. And you think to yourself, well, I'm not even really here for anything but cleanup. But it actually has a big impact on the rest of their lives, doesn't it?
This is something that drives me a little crazy. I was at an event with a bunch of women and they were saying, it's really not important to be with your kids in those early years. Those early years, someone in a daycare can do just as much as you can. It's more important to be available in the later years. And I was sitting there thinking, you mean the most important time for a child's brain's formation? We should not be involved. It's a crazy concept. Erica Commissar's book, Being There, really goes into this whole idea that those first 3 years are when a child's brain and neural connections are developed. And as parents, it's our responsibility to give our children the best basis to be whole human beings that we can. And when mothers are present in those first 3 years, we see a way lower anxiety rate. I mean, I think the most interesting element in Erica Commissar's book that stood out to me was the idea that there are genetic kind of things that are in little babies. And those will not present if mothers are there with their children, because anxiety is what causes those to express themselves, those genetic problems to express themselves. Those anxieties are lowered when babies are with their mothers. And so those genetic things don't end up expressing. And if the child is in a daycare or is constantly separated from mom, those genetic problems will express, and that's how you have a whole anxious generation, right? Because you've got children who are not being who are not being raised by mom and dad in those early years. They're really being put in daycares from the time they're 6 weeks old, 12 weeks old, and being forced to deal with hours and hours of separation from their primary caregivers from an age that they cannot comprehend or understand what's happening to them.
Abby, you have an article out. It's a very good article in the Daily Wire talking about why women voted for Trump. I mean, everyone remembers the election we just had and the lead up to it. Every single ad was something about how women are in danger, women are going to die, women, women, women. The entire basis around the Democrat campaign was centered around women, and then women, other than the young single ones, went out and voted for Donald Trump. Why?
It honestly, I thought it was so funny, the ad campaigns. There were two ad campaigns going on. One was, you're a woman, so you have to vote for a woman. And the second thing was, your rights are on the line. And if you don't vote for Kamala Harris, then you are against women. And women are not some faceless horde that can just be driven into the ground by stupid sayings like that. We're not going to just all vote as one because you told us that we are women and so we have to vote for a woman, or because Donald Trump is Satan incarnate and so we have to vote for the other side. No, women are individuals. And so we looked at, honestly, I think our grocery bills. We looked at, the problems with the border and illegal immigration and all the crime that has resulted. We looked at our children being put in danger because of all of the policies around transgenderism. And we looked at abortion and we realized that this is a crazy notion to say that we should have abortion up until the 9th month because our daughters deserve a future. What about the daughters in our wombs? I think a lot of women were thinking, I would like my child to be born, not I would like my 4-year-old to have the right to abort their child when they're 28. It was all, I think, just terrible messaging. And I think women voted on the things that matter to them. And so they looked at the options, Kamala Harris, terrible candidate who happens to be a woman. And we looked at Donald Trump, who did a great job last time he was in office. And my grocery bill wasn't twice what it is now. And they voted for the person who made sense. They didn't vote for someone just because it was a meme or a punchline.
Abby, a lot of people, I just saw a recent study that was 1 in 4. That number is so shockingly high. A lot of people are talking, younger people are talking about how they don't want kids for financial reasons. Now, it's very easy for someone like you or I, already established with kids, to say that's crazy, just have them anyway. And of course, that would be my message. Go make as many babies as you can. You might even enjoy yourself. But for young people looking at the finances, right, it doesn't pencil out. And they are freaking expensive, those little buggers. My son's ate a dozen eggs in 2 days this weekend. What do you say to those people?
Well, I think there's, the thing I would say to people, and also the actual data on the ground. So the truth is that most people are not making fundamental decisions about their family size based on their financials. There have been a lot of economic incentives for people to have more children. And when those economic incentives come into play, there's initially a baby boom, but it peters out and it ends up balancing. It basically, what it does is it encourages people to have children sooner, but it doesn't encourage them to have more children. So I don't think this argument about people having less children because of the financials and their finances is actually accurate. Most people are going to have the amount of children they would like to have because that's their value set. That's what they want. So I think the real question is, how do we convince young people that financially, that's going to, there are elements, of course, that you have to think about when it comes to the financials of having children. But I think that's more, what's even more important than that is instilling the values of why children are so wonderful. And not only from yes, it's going to make your life better. Yes, it's just the most incredible thing you can do as a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids who wants 5 or 6. I'm the biggest proponent of that. But it's also good for societies. I think we've been raised in a world that tells people that having children is bad for the world, right? Climate change and all these things, having babies is bad. Actually, we're in an incredible baby bust right now, which is horrible for our economies, for really a whole number of reasons that's going to just not end up panning out well. So having children is good. Now, from the perspective of financials, I know so many people who, because they know the importance of having children, are willing to live with less. And I think that's really the hardest thing to get across to people, is what you think is a fundamental necessity or baseline is actually much more than people have ever had in history. And so you don't necessarily need 2 brand new cars. You don't necessarily need to get coffee every morning from Starbucks. Like, there are things that you don't need that you will, it will pay dividends having children, because children are so much more important than that Starbucks Frappuccino that you are craving. Like, having that child is going to make more sense in the long run, because even outside of the financials, right? If you don't have children and you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, who is going to take care of you when you're older? You are going to be alone. And there is something so beautiful in the life cycle where your children, you take care of them and then they take care of you. So I could go on and on about it, but I won't.
No, I'm not going to hold you back. Starbucks isn't even very good anyway. The breakfast options are just awful. They have these little sandwiches, and there's never any sauce or anything like that with the sandwiches. I don't even like Starbucks. Abby, thank you so much. I appreciate it, as always. We'll be back. Okay. I know this is a conversation that gets uncomfortable when we have these specials and we talk about families, and I understand why it gets uncomfortable. People who don't necessarily have that, or it's not in the cards for them or something, they feel judged. Well, I don't have that, Jesse. I'm a single mom. There's no judgment here. We're talking about how to build a nation and where we want to go as a nation. And where we want to go as a nation is a nation of strong nuclear families. If the United States of America, if you told me 50 years from now, we would have more nuclear families that are together and strong than we do now, I don't need to know anything else about what's going on 50 years from now. I don't need to know about the debt or the border or anything else. That alone would tell me, are we going to be okay or not? And if you told me 50 years from now we had fewer nuclear families than we have today, more broken homes, then I don't need to know anything else. I don't need to know who's president, which party. I don't need to know anything else. I know we will be worse off. Let's be purposeful about this. Let's talk to our children about this. Let's make sure our leaders, our political leaders, speak openly and boldly about this. It matters a lot. All right? All right. We'll do it again.